Hi folks, today we're taking a more in-depth look at the Firepit barbecue table build. Today is all about the stonework, the foundation and the stonework itself. You could use this and just do a simple Firepit build itself. So stick around and I'll show you this first part of the build. For the background, we've made this retaining wall from oak sleepers and we've prepared our sub base back here. Now all of this will be topped with a self-binding gravel, and by the end of this week we will have that done. But today we need to focus our attention on this spot here. Right, first job is to mark out our foundation sort of area where we're going to dig out and lay some concrete ready to build off tomorrow. So with that thin layer of sub-base scraped back, I can cut away some of the geotextile, the weed fabric, to reveal the soil beneath. Now I wanted to dig down a fair bit, but only around the outside. There was no need in filling a whole slab. Then I took some timber. Now these are just old floorboards, but they are going to create our form, which is basically the size of our overall fire pit dimensions, plus about 50mm on each side. And then I can get that staked in so it's not going to budge whilst we're laying our concrete. If you spend time getting this bit right, so you've got a nice flat and level foundation, it just makes everything a bit easier later on. Now I had some steel mesh left over from the slab we poured last year, so it made sense to use some of that. So with the mixer over at my parents', I had to stick with the wheelbarrow, but it was fairly painless. This is a bog standard all-in sort of 10mm to dust or ballast type mix. It was about 5-to-1, maybe 6-to-1. It's a normal foundation sort of mix. Nothing too scientific about it. Bit of steel halfway up and then we're pretty much good to go. Good morning folks, it is day 2 of the fire pit build. Now yesterday I managed to get to this point, which is to have the footings in, and that's about it. Doesn't look much, but hopefully it was worth getting all this bit right. Today we should be able to start on the stonework, but I'm waiting for more of the lime, cement, sand and all that stuff to turn up. So what I can do is crack off this form, see how we did there. Also, I can start bringing down the stone. I've got a load at the top we can pick through, bring that down, and then hopefully we can hit the ground running this afternoon. The reason why I've left that centre section like that, we will clear out a little bit, is because I want any water that ever got in there, even though we're going to have a lid for it, it can drain away. We're not going to end up with some sort of wishing well here. Now I'm taking that original form and I'm cutting it down and remaking it into our internal dimensions. So I decided that the internal dimensions were going to be 500. That left me with about 150mm thickness of wall either side, which I can just about manage with the stone I've got. So I've got a 500mm column space inside, and I'll be using this form and moving it up as I build. So while it's not a true lime mortar like you would use for a breathable wall on the house, I have gone for 50-50 cement and lime, so it just gives it a little bit more flex, and it also helps with the coloration of the mortar. It's a little bit lighter and ties in with the stone. So this mix, I've gone for 4 building sand, 2 sharp sand, 1 cement, 1 lime. You can mix and match that sand ratio, the sharp sand to building sand, you just get a little bit more of a textured, grittier mortar, which kind of works with this sort of build. The key really with any stonework mortar is just to make sure that that mortar is weaker than the stone, and that lime just helps with that a little bit more forgiving. So even though this is a simple rustic garden project, it's a bit of a warm-up gig for all the stonework I've been doing recently, and I'm trying to use up some of the less than ideal stonework, keeping some of the bigger, squarer stone for the main house. But little by little, I worked my way up, trying to break all the bonds as best I could, with a few jumpers in there just to mix things up. But it did take a bit of time, and it didn't quite look as I wanted it, but it's all rustic, and most of it's going to be hidden behind table legs. But I thought I'd jump in and tell you what on earth I'm getting on with. I've got the time lapse running and kind of before and after, but this is kind of a midway explanation because I'm kind of winging it as usual. So nothing about this stonework is easy. It's the same stone that came out of the house, which is a rubble filled wall, and it's very, very random stone. There's normally one good face, that's it. I've got this wooden form in here which is maintaining our 500mm square all the way up, and I'm just kind of lifting that and raising it as we go. Things are drying so quick that the bottom mortar is kind of staying put, but I will tidy it all up inside, because what I'm going to do is have a sort of rendered rubble side to the bottom of it, but I'm actually going to dress the top half in firebrick. This wall here, this side, is going to have the crank handle for our fire pit, so that's why I've got a larger stone there, and I think that's just about where I need it to be. Right, it's day 3 of the stonework on the, well, day 3 of the fire pit build in its completeness. Day 1 was kind of foundations, getting all materials ready. Day 2, starting on the stonework and starting on some of the welding. And day 3 is today. I've made a fairly early start trying to get the rest of the stonework finished. Now I want to come up to 700mm, which we're almost at now, which is going to be our table height as well. New mix is ready, so I'm going to make a start on this side. I'm kind of dry fitting a course or so at a time, so I'm ready to go. So that is probably going to be the final course, and then we're going to cap it off on top. Right, now at a point where I want to cap off the top of all this to make it nice and level and clean, because it's going to sit over our tables in the end. I've still got half a pallet of the limestone patio slabs left, which are great, and they tie in 'cause it's the same limestone, or it is a similar colour. I can get away with 9 of these around the outside, which kind of works, but again it means a few joins, so I figured it was between doing that or using some of the big slabs. I only need 2 of them for this. If I cut those into long lengths, might of the corners we can get away with 4 to frame the whole thing, if that makes sense, which might look quite nice too. So I'm going to try that, and hopefully we don't crack these big slabs. that's the noisy bit over. I think it's just about worked okay. This is how we're looking now. So these are all wet still, and they're all dusty still, but it should all mellow down eventually. Just something like the stonework here. By pulling them out 10mm to give us our mortar gap, we now need to make sure we've left 400 for our lifting grill. It's the next morning, everything is nice and solid. What I want to do is just fine tune some bits here. I want to take the corners off because we've got quite an overhang here and it's going to be unsupported, that mortar. Plus it's just one more thing to bump your head on. And also I want to just soften the inside corner just where I've done a cut. On the outside it's tumbled and natural, so I'm going to kind of replicate that on the inside. And also where I haven't been spot on with this mitre because I'm trying to match it up with the stonework, I'm just going to open this up a little bit just so it's even all the way along. So we're approaching the top half of the fire pit, which is where I'm going to line it with fire bricks. Now, Vitcast are based in Bristol, which isn't too far from here, and they normally have a damaged pile outside the factory. If you call ahead, you can buy those. They're 99p each, and as providing you're picking them up, that's a cheap way of doing this sort of job where you're not really going to see them. They're only about 30mm thick, and using the high temperature mortar, which comes in a tub, you mix it up. We use that to line this the top half of the fire pit. We're also going to use some in the barbecue itself, which will be in the next build video. Another future video will cover the self-binding gravel we used, but that had to be compacted down next, as this was the very last day of our build with our end of week deadline. The last thing was to just core out a couple of holes. Now, one was on the back reverse side, and that was just to enable some decent airflow underneath the fire. We've also got a little leaf blower that slots in there, and you can flick that on, and hopefully in a future video I'll show that in action, because that is a super efficient way of getting the fire going, either to start it off or just to get a really hot clean burn. And then another drilling out on the front there that's basically where our spindle or axle of our lifting mechanism goes through. So it had to have a bit of a bushing, a bit of a pipe work in there for it to slide through. So at the end of this video I'll link to the full build, which shows the start to finish project, and it kind of explains how the design works, which is a lifting barbecue with tables around it for when you want to use it as a barbecue, and also as a fire pit like this, which you can sit around in the evening. The complex part of the build was the metal work, the steel frame and the lifting mechanism, so that will be a future video to explain the design side of that. But thank you for watching. Remember, if you can, do it yourself, and we'll see you next time.